He raised the glass with a smile, confident, steady, like a man about to give a toast, not detonate a life. Then he said it, that he'd hooked up with my wife. Before we were serious, he added, like that was a seatbelt strong enough to hold back the crash. Laughter rippled through the room, nervous, confused, until silence folded over us like a funeral coat. My wife froze. I dropped my fork. And my brother? He just kept smiling, like he hadn't just set fire to everything I thought was real. My name's Eli. I'm 34, a middle school math teacher from Kansas City. My wife's name is Grace. And this is the story of how the best man's speech at my wedding became the end of our marriage. I'm not the kind of guy who makes a big scene. Never been. I don't yell. I don't throw things. I solve problems like I grade homework, calmly, methodically, red pen in hand. But that night, I wasn't a teacher. I was a man whose life had just been stripped down in front of over 100 people, including my students' parents, my pastor, and my wife's 92-year-old grandmother, who clutched her pearls like someone had just screamed the F word during communion. Let me back up. My brother's name is Jake, 2 years younger. Always the charming one. Life of the party, knows how to make a crowd laugh. Jake. He was the quarterback in high school, the kind of kid teachers either adored or barely tolerated. I was the steady one, the B-plus student, the guy who carried jumper cables in the back of his car just in case. Jake was my best man because he asked. Because he said he wanted to make it up to me for missing most of my life these past few years, first in LA, then Austin, then God knows where. I didn't think too hard about it. I figured people grow up, settle down. I thought maybe this was his way of saying he was ready to be a part of something again. I didn't ask for a speech. He insisted, said it'd be short and sweet, said he had the perfect story to get people laughing. I had no idea that story would start with Grace and end with me wondering if I just married a stranger. We met 4 years ago, Grace and I, at a trivia night. She was there with friends. I was there because my colleague dragged me out of the house after my 3rd year of being comfortably single. She was smart, quick, beautiful in this quiet, non-flashy way that made you notice her without knowing why. She knew the capital of Namibia. I was hooked. 6 months later, we were official. A year after that, living together. No major drama. No screaming matches. We fought about the thermostat, about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. She said yes. I said only under duress. But that was it. I never asked her much about her past. She told me she'd dated around. Said she'd had a wild phase in her 20s. I didn't pry. Because honestly, I didn't want to be one of those guys, the ones who get obsessed with what came before, like love is some kind of clean record that gets ruined by scratches. I thought we'd made peace with all that. Until Jake picked up that mic. He started normal, talked about how proud he was, talked about how love is rare, how lucky I was to find someone like Grace. Then he paused, grinned, and said, and I'll never forget this, now, before Dan and Grace were Dan and Grace, there was this one night, way back, when Grace and I, laughter. Well, let's just say we got to know each other, biblically. The crowd went weirdly quiet. He chuckled. Relax. It was before they were serious. Before either of them even knew they'd end up here. But yeah, small world, huh? I didn't move. Not at first. Grace's face turned paper white. Jake clinked his glass. To forgiveness, to fate, to family. And everyone, not knowing what else to do, clapped. Like it was just another awkward wedding joke. But it wasn't. Because what Jake had just confessed wasn't just inappropriate. It was news to me. I didn't explode. Didn't say a word. Just stood up. Walked out the side door of the reception hall. And kept walking. I don't know how long I was out there. Long enough for the music to start back up. For the clapping to fade. For my head to catch up with my heart. Then I heard the door creak open behind me. Grace's voice. Dan, but I didn't turn around. I just said the one thing I needed to say. Is it true? And the silence that followed? That told me more than any speech ever could. She didn't answer right away. Didn't rush into damage control. Didn't protest. She just stood there behind me, like the truth had pinned her in place. That was all I needed. Because when someone's innocent, they say it fast. They don't freeze. They don't look at the ground like it might swallow them whole. She finally whispered, it was a long time ago. I turned, slowly, looked her in the eyes, the same eyes I thought I'd be waking up next to for the next 50 years. And all I could say was, why didn't you tell me? She opened her mouth, closed it, then finally said, because it didn't mean anything. That line? It didn't mean anything. That's the kind of sentence people say when they're trying to stuff a forest fire into a shoebox. Like if you say it's small enough, it won't burn the house down, but it still does. Because what it meant wasn't the point. What it was, who it was, that was the whole damn issue. She said it happened once. Before we met. A party. Too much tequila. We didn't know each other then, she added. Not like this. But here's the thing. Jake knew who I was. Grace might have been a stranger to me back then, but Jake wasn't. He was my brother. He'd known me since I had crooked teeth and a fear of thunderstorms. And even if it was before Grace and I became a thing, why didn't either of them tell me? Why wait until the biggest day of my life? Why turn a wedding toast into a confession? Unless it wasn't just a confession. It was sabotage. We sat on a bench behind the reception hall, hidden from the guests. Inside, our wedding was still happening without us. People were dancing, drinking, pretending they hadn't just witnessed the emotional equivalent of a car crash. Grace kept trying to explain, said it wasn't a big deal, that she and Jake barely spoke after, that she never even thought of him as a part of her life until I reintroduced them. I didn't lie, she said. I just didn't bring it up. I asked her again, did Jake know before the wedding? She hesitated, then said, I think he figured it out a few months ago. And you? I asked. She looked down. Not until the engagement party, when I saw an old photo of you two on the fridge. That's when it clicked. And still, I said, the words tasting bitter. No one said anything. Not when we picked Jake to be best man. Not when we handed him the mic. Not even when Grace started drafting vows about honesty and second chances. They just kept going. Like the truth was something that could be swallowed, buried, forgotten. And now here we were. Married. Legally. Publicly. But not honestly. I didn't go back inside that night. Didn't cut the cake. Didn't do the first dance. Didn't smile for photos. I got in my car, still wearing the suit jacket, and drove to a motel 3 exits outside of town. I didn't tell anyone where I was. Except Jake. I sent him one text. 3 words. You knew. Why? He replied 5 minutes later. We were drunk. It meant nothing. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to ruin what you had. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I sent one more. You didn't ruin it by doing it, Jake. You ruined it by thinking I wouldn't care. He never replied. The next morning, I sat at the foot of a motel bed, watching sunlight creep across a dusty carpet, trying to make sense of what the hell my life had turned into. My wife had slept with my brother, before we were serious, but after he knew who I was. And now, I had to ask myself a question I never thought I'd face. Did I still want to be married? Or had that speech, that perfectly timed, perfectly placed grenade, already answered that for me? I sat in that motel room for hours. Didn't turn on the TV. Didn't check my phone. Just stared at the ceiling like it might spell something out for me. A direction, a sign, anything. The room was silent, but my head wasn't. Because here's the truth nobody likes to admit. It's not just the betrayal that breaks you. It's the rewind. It's the way your brain starts dragging the past back up like a detective at a cold case crime scene. Every hug between Jake and Grace. Every inside joke they shared that I didn't quite get. Every moment I chalked up to harmless chemistry suddenly looked like a rerun of something I'd never seen the first time. It made my stomach turn. Because whether it was a one-time thing or not, it was theirs. A history I never knew existed. And now? That history had just rewritten my wedding day. By Sunday morning, everyone knew something was wrong. I hadn't come home. Grace's texts were short and careful, like she was walking on emotional eggshells. Can we talk? I'm so sorry. I need you to understand. But I didn't need understanding. I needed truth. And not just about them, but about me. Why didn't I see it? Why did I let this happen? That's what betrayal does. It makes you doubt your instincts. Makes you wonder if you've always been 2 steps behind the punchline. Around 10 a.m., I called my dad. He didn't ask what happened. He just said, come over. Sitting in my parents' kitchen, with the smell of overcooked bacon and the same clock ticking on the wall since I was 10, I felt like a kid again, except this time. The monsters weren't under the bed. They were in tuxedos, holding champagne. My dad poured me coffee and sat across the table, silent for a while. Then he said something that stuck with me. You know, your brother's been jealous of you since you made JV before he did. Never said it, never showed it outright. But you were always the one who got it right the first time. The one people counted on. I didn't say anything. He kept going. So when I saw him give that speech, I knew something was off. That wasn't a joke. That was a jab. He wanted to leave a mark. And son, he did. That night, I went home. Our apartment looked exactly how we'd left it. Wedding gifts stacked by the door. Grace's bouquet in a vase, wilting like it knew it didn't belong anymore. Grace was sitting on the couch, still in her satin robe, hair pulled back, no makeup. The version of her I used to love seeing the most. The version that felt real. She looked up at me like someone waiting on a verdict. Dan, I didn't sit. I asked her, straight. Did you know he was going to say it? Her face collapsed a little. No. I swear. I didn't. And if he hadn't? She swallowed. I never planned to tell you. There it was. The nail in the coffin. She wasn't sorry for what happened. She was sorry it got exposed. We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, she said, "Do you want a divorce?" I looked around the room, at the framed engagement photo, at the wedding invite still stuck to the fridge, at the couch where we'd mapped out our future. And I realized. I didn't know. Because part of me still loved her. And the other part? The part holding the knife in its back? Didn't know if it could trust her ever again. "I don't know what I want," I said. "But I know I need space." She nodded. Eyes shining, but she didn't cry. I grabbed a duffel bag, packed enough for a week, and left. As I closed the door behind me, I realized something that gutted me deeper than anything else. My brother had gotten what he wanted. Not Grace. Not a second chance. But me, unmoored, uncertain, alone. And the worst part? He delivered the blow with a smile, like it was the greatest punchline he'd ever told. A few days later, I got a call from my Aunt Meredith, Jake's godmother. Said he'd flown home early. Said he wasn't returning calls. Said he looked like a man who just dropped a glass and was waiting to hear it shatter. I didn't respond, because the glass had already shattered. The question was, who was going to clean it up? I'd been staying at a friend's place across town, sleeping on a couch with Springs older than I was, eating takeout, dodging texts from both of them. Grace had stopped trying after day 3. Jake hadn't texted at all, but he didn't have to. He'd spoken loud enough at the reception. And in that silence, I kept asking myself the same thing. Was it really just a one-night mistake? Because here's what bothered me most. Jake had always been impulsive, but not stupid. He knew what that confession would do. That wasn't a slip. That was a surgical strike. So what was the real motive? I finally got my answer the next week. Kevin, one of my groomsmen, solid guy, old friend, called me out of the blue. "Hey, man, I don't want to stir the pot, but something weird's going on." I asked what he meant. He said a few nights before the wedding, he and his girlfriend had gone out to a bar near the hotel where Grace's bridal party was staying. And who did they see there? Jake. Not drinking with friends. Not catching up with family. But standing outside the hotel at 1 a.m., talking to Grace. Close. Too close. Kevin said they didn't look like strangers. Or even friends. They looked like people who shared secrets. And when Grace saw them watching, she walked away. Jake stayed. Lit a cigarette. Smiled. I hung up the phone and sat in my car for a long time. My hands were shaking, and I didn't know if it was from anger or fear, because this wasn't about some long-past hookup anymore. This was current. This was deliberate. And it meant one of two things. Either Jake had never let her go, or Grace had never fully chosen me. That night, I sent her a message. "Kevin saw you. Outside the hotel. With Jake. 1 a.m. What was that?" Her reply came 10 minutes later. "He cornered me outside the bar. I didn't know he'd be there." We talked for a few minutes. About what? This time, the pause was longer. Then, he said I should tell you, that it would be better coming from me. I told him I wouldn't, that it didn't matter anymore, that it was over. I stared at that message like it might rewrite itself. "Did you mean it?" I finally typed. "That it was over?" She responded with one sentence. "Yes, but I should have said it to you, not him." I didn't reply, because in that moment, it hit me. She hadn't cheated. But she hadn't chosen me with both hands either. And in a marriage, that kind of hesitation is its own kind of betrayal. So I drove. Didn't call. Didn't announce myself. Just showed up at Jake's place, a 2-bedroom townhouse he rented from a friend, the kind of place with beer cans in the sink and no curtains on the windows. He opened the door and didn't look surprised to see me. He just leaned against the frame and said, "So, you're finally here." No apology. No shame. Just that same smug, tired confidence he's always worn like cologne. We sat outside. No yelling. No fists. Just two brothers with a history too heavy for small talk. "I want to know the truth," I said. "Did something happen recently? With you and Grace?" He didn't deny it. Didn't confirm it either. He just stared out at the street and said, "You always got everything, Dan. The grades. The job. The house. The girl. And I was always the screw-up." I waited. He laughed once, bitter and sharp. "You remember Mom's funeral?" he asked. "When you gave that perfect eulogy. People lined up to shake your hand like you were the damn mayor." I didn't answer. "That was the day I knew I'd always be background noise in your life," he said. "And when I figured out who Grace was, I thought maybe the universe was giving me a second shot." "So you punished me for being chosen?" He shrugged. "No. I reminded you you're not untouchable." That hit harder than I expected. Because it wasn't jealousy. It was sabotage, dressed up as justice. He couldn't stand the idea that I had something solid, something he'd never built for himself. So he cracked it. Not because he wanted grace, but because he wanted me to feel what it was like to lose. I left without another word. No closure. No cursing. Just silence between us, stretched tight and permanent. That night, I packed the rest of my things from the apartment. Grace wasn't home. Or maybe she was hiding in the back room, letting me go without a final scene. I didn't leave a note. Didn't slam the door. I just grabbed what was mine and walked out. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say is nothing. And in that silence, I started to reclaim something I didn't even realize I'd lost. Myself. 2 weeks after I left, the wedding gifts were still stacked in Grace's apartment. I know because I went back, not to talk, not to argue, just to return the last thing I had of hers. The vows. We'd written them in matching journals, bought from a little shop downtown. Hers was pale blue with gold foil on the cover. Mine was navy. She hadn't read hers at the ceremony. Neither had I. But I did that night. Alone, in a motel room, with a lamp too dim and a bed that smelled like bleach. She wrote about how I made her feel calm, safe, how I never made her question her worth. And I realized something brutal as I closed that book. She wasn't promising me anything. She was thanking me. Like the vows were a farewell letter she hadn't signed yet. So I slid the book into a padded envelope and left it in her mailbox with a note. No hard feelings. Just no more pretending. The next day, I met with a lawyer. Told him I wanted out clean, fast, quiet. He said annulments were rare, but not impossible. You'd need to prove misrepresentation, he said. That she entered the marriage hiding something fundamental, something that, if you'd known, you wouldn't have gone through with it. I showed him the speech, the photos, the texts. He nodded slowly. It's not open and shut, but I've seen cases go through unless. We can file under fraudulent concealment. Worst case, it defaults to a standard divorce. I signed the paperwork that afternoon. I didn't care what the court called it. I just wanted my name untangled from hers. And once the forms were in, a strange thing happened. I slept. Really slept. Not the kind of tossing, sweat-stained rest I'd had the week after the wedding, but real, quiet sleep, the kind where you stop clenching your jaw in the dark because your heart knows it's no longer in danger. And in that quiet, I started thinking about what this all meant. Because pain without reflection is just noise. But pain with meaning? That's growth. I looked at her, at the woman I once thought I'd grow old beside, and asked the one question still burning in me. Was it really over between you two? She didn't flinch. But she didn't say yes either. She just looked down and whispered, I don't know. I felt my jaw tighten. You don't know, I said, quieter than I expected. She shook her head, fast, like she wanted to erase the words from the air. No, I don't feel anything for him. Not like that. But when he showed up again, it brought something back. Not feelings. Just shame. Guilt. A version of me I thought I buried. She looked up. Eyes full of something I couldn't read. And I didn't know how to close the door completely without burning part of myself down too. That was the final piece of the puzzle. She hadn't just lied by omission. She'd kept a door open. Not to Jake, but to a past she hadn't fully made peace with. And maybe that was worse. Because love can survive betrayal, but it can't survive confusion. We said goodbye outside. No hugs, no lingering glances. Just two people who once dreamed of forever, now trying to be decent in the aftermath. I watched her walk away, and you'd think that moment would have been the saddest part of this whole mess. But it wasn't, because as I stood there in the wind, watching her disappear into a crowd of strangers, I didn't feel broken. I felt relieved, free even, like I'd just stepped off a boat I didn't realize had been sinking. The last message I got from Jake came a few days later. No greeting, no apology, just 5 words. You're better off without her. I stared at it for a long time. He wasn't wrong. But he didn't say it like a brother. He said it like someone delivering a punchline. Like the pain was the joke. I deleted it. Because whatever truth there was in that sentence, it didn't come from love. It came from spite. And I was done carrying his bitterness like it was mine. I spent that evening doing something small. I went for a drive. Same road Grace and I used to take when we talked about the future. Past the lake. Past the little winery with the crooked fence. Past the house we once said we'd buy someday. And when I got to the overlook, I got out. Stood there with the wind in my face, watching the sun slide down behind the trees. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't think about Grace. I didn't think about Jake. I just stood there as me. No husband. No brother. Just a man learning to breathe again. 3 months after the annulment was finalized, I moved. Not out of spite. Not to run. But but because I needed a space where the walls didn't remember her laugh or the sound of my brother's voice the day he cracked my life open. I found a one-bedroom on the edge of town. Quiet. Lots of light. No history. The landlord asked if I had any questions about the place. I said just one. Has anyone ever lied to someone they loved here? He looked confused. I told him I was kidding. But I wasn't. Funny thing happens when your life breaks in public. People show up. Some disappear. But the ones who stay? They become something else. My friend Kevin, the one who saw Jake outside the hotel, helped me paint the new place. We didn't talk much while we worked, just music and rollers and shared silence. But when we were done, he said, "You know, I always thought you and Grace had it figured out." I nodded. "So did I." He paused. Then, "But maybe you did. For a while. Maybe that's enough." I didn't answer right away. Because it wasn't. Not for forever. But maybe for then. And that's a kind of Grace I hadn't allowed myself to believe in. I ran into Grace once, about a month later. Grocery store. She was in the produce aisle, holding a head of lettuce like it might say something worth hearing. We locked eyes. No drama. No awkward ducking behind shelves. She smiled, soft and sad. I nodded. And then we both moved on. 2 carts. 2 paths. No need for reruns. Jake? I haven't spoken to him since. A few cousins say he moved again. New state. New job. New name on the lease. That tracks. Jake's always been good at leaving messes behind. Less good at cleaning them up. But I don't hate him. I should. But I don't. Because hate is just another way of holding on. And I've let go. One morning, a few weeks ago, I found Grace's journal in a box I thought I'd thrown out. The one with the vows. I almost tossed it. But something stopped me. So I read the first page again. "I used to think love was supposed to feel like falling," she wrote. "But with you, it felt like landing." And that scared me more than I knew how to admit. I stared at that sentence for a long time. I used to think landing was the goal. Turns out, for some people, it's the beginning of panic. Maybe she wanted safety. Maybe she just didn't know what to do with it once she had it. I closed the book. Not because it hurt, but because I finally understood. Some people don't break your heart because they're cruel. They do it because they're still trying to outrun themselves. And sometimes, you're just the last soft place they land before they fall again. And that was never about me. It was about gravity. So here I am, still teaching, still folding laundry the way she teased me for, still believing that love, the real kind, doesn't need secrets to survive. The next time I stand at the altar, if there is a next time, it won't be with someone who keeps a door cracked open to the past. It'll be with someone who locks it behind her. Someone who knows that the best man in the room isn't holding a microphone. He's standing beside her. No punchlines. No secrets. Just 2 people ready. And this time, I won't be the last to know the truth. I'll be the first when it's offered to. Willingly. Freely. With both hands open. And that'll be the wedding that finally counts.